Thank you so much, everyone. By show of hands, I just want to see who in this room has been a participant in Academics for Black Lives. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Because I have the two co-founders in here with me today. Here's me and Dr. Della. And Paris just accepted the APAG's Distinguished Graduate Student Award. And I didn't see enough of you in the room. So I just want us to keep that in mind as we think about celebrating the people who transformed our profession and what that means for the journey to liberation and how you make it sustainable. In my podcast, How to Love a Human, I asked the guests, what would the world be like if it loved you? It's not the first question I ask, it's one of the last, because before that, we co-framed the problem and the solution. This question speaks to the outcome we're seeking, liberation, and addressing the problem of intersecting oppression with the intervention of multifaceted forms of love. My first question, on the other hand, is a bit different. It represents the theory through which I framed this project. Are you feeling human or human as fuck? You see, the context of intersecting oppression is that most of us have fundamentally fucked up definitions of who is and who is not human. We were socialized into these ideas and definitions because most of us grew up in heterosexist and cissexist and sexist and racist and classist and ableist and all of the ecologically oppressive contexts. I know I did. That socialization had me thinking I had to prove my humanity, that it wasn't inherent, behaving in superhuman ways at the expense of my well-being. As an example, in 2013, my cohort member and friend, Farah, died of lung cancer. And rather than dropping a summer qualitative research class, I took one day, drove to her funeral in DC from Athens, then drove right back so I would only miss one day. Can anyone else relate to that level of self-harm? And, big and, it also had me thinking I was better than other human beings in some ways too. That seductive endorsement of oppressive ideology and my investment in it was rewarded with social capital, but at the cost to other people's humanity and my own. Acknowledgement of how my privilege paved the way is part of the liberation work I do. For example, I have slim body, able-bodied, cisgender, heterosexual, English-speaking, US citizenship, and neurotypical privilege, and I've had them my whole life. However, I brokered neurotypical intelligence, that is, being smart in the ways racism and eugenics gives value to intelligence, to earn a college degree. It was my investment in elitism. Now, I've always loved to learn. It's one of my favorite things to do. But the early intention behind that learning was to escape poverty and to be better. Words like better and the like point to internalization of a human hierarchy, a lack of love. So today I'm actively on a liberation journey. It's a daily practice to make the choices that liberation requires of us. It demands courage and authenticity and integrity. It requires divestment from the ideology and behaviors privilege promotes. It requires me to use my power with intention to liberate myself and participate in the liberation of others. I can't save anyone. I can only be in solidarity. Sometimes I am in alignment and sometimes I fuck it up. What I can say is that the lessons I've learned over the course of my 39 years through my research, my practice, community engagement, activism work is that, as corny as it sounds, love is power and purpose. It is the energy and the reason. Love was, in many ways, the additional hedge of protection that laid the path for a dark-skinned, nappy-haired Black girl from a working-class family. The Black women who raised me invested in me, poured into me the type of love that fertilizes resilience and brilliance and audacity. Love wasn't just words, it was action. My grandmother, when I graduated from Spelman College, gave me a pen that she earned when she retired as a certified nursing assistant. She said, "I wiped asses for 20 years so you wouldn't have to." That sticks with me. I remember that when the less arduous task of engaging more justly to facilitate the liberation of someone else is in front of me. So I understand liberation to require love, and it shows up in my work. It shows up when I mentor. It shows up when I create research, questions, and theory. It shows up when I teach. It shows up when I lead. It's active, executive, demonstrative. It looks like being willing to lose my job to speak truth to power. It looks like being ever willing to build another table if I'm disinvited from one for asking for justice. Because if the world loved me, it would love y'all too. We'd all know who we are and have reverence for each other and this earth and other aspects of life that we take for granted. We'd have educational systems that hold truth and cultivate curiosity. We'd have universal and equitable access to healing and wellness resources. Everyone who wanted to be housed would be. Food and water would be abundant. We wouldn't have to suppress emotions or hoard resources and power. Shame and fear wouldn't constrict us. We could love who we loved, all body sizes, skin colors, hair textures, genders, spiritual practice, and cultures would be affirmed. And that's not even an exhaustive list because I have a radical imagination. But what's even doper is that my strengths lie in strategic visioning and execution. So here's the secret. On my liberation journey, I'm already in the process of creating this type of world. Getting to be a part of the magic and the medicine brings me so much joy. And I'm so grateful to get to do it with all of you. Thank you so much to the people who nominated me and the folks who love me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams. I'm going to turn it over to you, Annette.
Is it, yep. Projected. Is it on? Good? Do you want me to advance it? Okay. We have the advancer too, right? Is it ready? Is it up there? You see a slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, Counseling Psychology. I'm Lynette Vigas and I use she, her pronouns. At this point in the fellows address, I would expect to thank my mentors and colleagues. I was also planning to share how my participation in Academics for Black Survival and Wellness was a Damascus Road experience for me. In those deep training spaces, I found my lane in creating the open education resource, Recentering Psych Stats. That's why it's sent in Recentering as the title of this address. But I'm going to depart from this because I need to tell a story. Yay, it worked. 50% of the employees and 90% of the students joined Seattle Pacific University, not knowing that our private Protestant institution, which is both ecumenical and evangelical, has hiring policies and practices that discriminate against members of the LGBTQIA+ community. As faculty, we learned this when we began serving on search committees. As we entered into leadership positions, we learned that the actionable policies were intentionally scattered across multiple documents and hidden from the public. We were given the veiled and clear message that we should not be the ones to call media or legal attention to this form of discrimination. In January 2021, beloved adjunct nursing professor J.O. Reindahl filed an employment discrimination lawsuit against SPU after being told that his application for a tenure-track position would not be moved forward because he was married to a man. Although we were quarantined from home, you could hear an uproarious cheer from the faculty and staff who, while also complicit in maintaining these harms, were released to engage in the advocacy we had so longed to do. At this point in my story, I will pause to offer deep gratitude for Dr. Della Mosley and soon to be Dr. Paris Bellamy for Academics for Black Survival and Wellness, because A4BL unapologetically attended to all the isms, racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, and their intersectionality. We who attended, and many did from SPU, were better equipped to enter these activist spaces. During this period of activism, we worked hard and we've witnessed some gains. So much of the effort was initiated by the core leaders of our undergraduate student senate. Last fall, they asked for help with a campus-wide survey. I was joined by doctoral students in our clinical and IO psychology programs. One of those, my advisee, Clara O'Brien, is here with me. Among other things, we learned that 75% of the employees and 86% of the students want the policies to be eliminated or revised. Other developments were also promising. In a December 2021 summary judgment hearing, a King County Superior Court ruled that SPU could not claim the ministerial exception for full-time faculty. Our Chief Diversity Officer released guidelines on why pronouns matter. Termed SPU in one room, biology, psychology, and theology departments led progressive sessions that demonstrated why policies must be changed and can still be Christian. The most important progress was the third way resolution that emerged from the LGBTQIA+ working group commissioned by the interim president and the board. It was not an ideal solution, but we believed it to be a viable step in the identity development of our organization. Unfortunately, in a midnight maneuver, go ahead, sorry. In the midnight maneuver 2 weeks before the May 20th board vote, two white heterosexual male religious leaders, those for whom Dr. Janet Helm's WIMP moniker would definitely apply, made it impossible for the board to change the policy. One of those wimps has used my least favorite Christian metaphor to describe his position. This is my hill to die on. I will see SPU close before we change the policy. The students responded with a demonstration at commencement you might have seen. It went viral on TikTok and they held a 39-day sit-in. But there's so much more bad news. The J.O. Reindahl lawsuit settled out of court, enrollments are tanking, and we have a $16 million deficit. Faculty and staff are hemorrhaging their positions. We've lost 4 of the affirming members of the board, all people of color, and the vice president level people holding the positions of diversity, finance, and enrollment have also resigned. Last week, we learned that the Washington Attorney General's office heard many of our complaints, yay, and they opened an investigation. We also learned that SPU leadership has filed a lawsuit with the US District Court, alleging that the AG inquiry violates its right to religious freedom. SPU is being represented by Beckett Law, a nationally recognized religious liberty firm of Hobby Lobby fame. There is speculation that SPU is being identified as the location for a culture war that Beckett is hoping to take to the Supreme Court. The students have raised more than $38,000 directed toward a lawsuit against the non-affirming members of the Board of Trustees for their breach of fiduciary responsibilities. My advisee and I have agreed to join the strategically representative set of plaintiffs who can provide evidence of the harms of the policy. That GoFundMe and that QR code is active, so put your 25 or more right there. The dilemma I sit with today is about the thing I love the most. Our clinical psychology program, which was just reaccredited full in 10 in the middle of this dumpster fire. Can I continue to bring students into a space where I know from good science, even some of my own, that they'll experience harm? And can I allow students to sign on for a 5 or 6 year expensive unfunded program when we have concerns about the viability of the institution? Graduate programs at SPU are completely in charge of their own admissions, and I'm thinking it's time we leverage that power by suggesting that we sunset our program. My time is up, but I welcome continued conversation.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome Dr. Choi.
Thank you, everyone. Before I start, I would like to have my interns. Can you stand up, please? They're here with me. deeply honored and humbled to receive the recognition as one of the APA Division 17 Fellows. I would like to begin with recognizing individuals who helped me develop the knowledge, skills, and attitude that facilitate my work. I'm very fortunate to participate in the racism lab led by Dr. Jim Browns when I was a graduate student at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I was surprised to learn that a white male was interested in doing research in this area. When I joined the Colorblind Racism lab headed by Dr. Helen Neville, it opened my eyes about the complexity of issues involving racial attitude. It was their guidance, support, and acceptance of my flaws that allowed me to learn and grow. Witnessing the challenges of completing my dissertation, my thesis director, Dr. C.Y. Chu, ensured that he met with me every week for a whole year for guidance and mentorship. I'm forever in debt to his generosity in time, energy, as well as emotional support and intellectual guidance. I learned that cultural values can be triggered by various environmental cues, and in turn, they exert various impacts onto our behaviors. I received my first job as a clinical assistant professor at the University of Florida Counseling Center, thanks to Dr. Toti Perez for having such a warm and welcoming job interview. I learned that in order to do that, one would need to start the interview with emphasizing the remarkable weather in your area. Then the director, Dr. Jackie Resnick, encouraged me to develop my dream program for the international initiative that help international students transition into the US academic culture. She and my mentors, Drs. Paul Szabo, Mary Fukuyama, Dave Suchman, provided not only the skills needed for my clinical work, outreach, training, and teaching, but also emotional support that I needed. For years, my best professional friends and colleague, Dr. Natasha Mena Pemba, provided ample support and guidance. She helped me develop the training skills that I needed to become a training director. Even after I left UF, she continued to support me and nominated me for the fellow. I'm extremely grateful for what you have done for me and how you have supported me over the years, Natasha. She's not here, but I hope she sees it. I would like to also express my gratitude toward Dr. Mayfin Wei and Dr. Gisela Lin for their mentorship, support, and nomination for the fellow. Their mentorship started when I was serving in various roles for the Taiwanese Psychology Network. There, I was able to connect and receive support from many professional friends, including Dr. Yue Wang, Kenneth Wang, Hongbin Xu, Scott Liu, DC Wang, and Shupin Lin. I learned that building a community of support goes a long way, both professionally and personally. Currently, I'm serving as the chair for the Association of Chinese Helping Professionals and Psychologists International. My gratitude goes out to Dr. Zhang Min Duan and Dr. Guangdong Jiang for connecting me with this wonderful organization that filled with warm support and, most importantly, the cultural connection. I appreciate the opportunity to provide training in China and working with the Chinese registration system that support the Chinese international students here in the US. I appreciate the opportunity to work with the talented leaders such as Dr. Xiaomin Jia, Huayu Zhang, Deng Xue, and Li Dangu. As the incoming co-chair for the Division 17 International Session, I'm grateful for the support and guidance from Drs. Huangzhu Huang, Shaslin Daruwala, Hansin Lin, Hong Qiao, and Andrea Consoli. I'm very excited to build a supportive community with individuals around the globe. Serving as a training director at the University of California Irvine Counseling Center, I'm very fortunate to work with a very talented team. It was a very difficult transition for me when the pandemic hit within the first few months of moving into the position. But thanks to my director, Dr. Francis Diaz, and members of the leadership team, Drs. Vivian Yamada, Melody Garst, and Woody Victoria, I was able to transition and settle into the position as smooth as could be expected. Lastly, allow me to express my gratitude toward my family members. I came from a working class family where my parents and siblings did not have the kind of opportunities that I have. I'm grateful that they supported me to pursue the career that I dreamed of. I'm very grateful to my wife for the enormous support she provided. She is my go-to person when I needed someone to lean on and tell me that I'm good enough. I'm also very proud of my son for following his heart and pursuing the music career, not because it's easy, but because it's challenging. As I was working on this speech, I was once again reminded that it takes a village to raise a person. If I may reflect briefly what I've learned, I would say that challenge takes time, and only when I recognize that I need to take the responsibility for my own change agent, nothing will change. If I want others to be collegial with me, I need to be mindful of how I deliver my message to them. If I want to stop discrimination around me, I need to look at how I carry my own attitude toward people that are different from me. I will end with this Confucius saying, don't do unto others what you don't want done unto you. 己所不欲，勿施于人。谢谢。
We have Dr. Dillon.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I am honored to be awarded fellow status by Division 17. And when I received the notice that I was awarded, one of my first reactions was, oh no, I have to give one of those talks. Is APA going to be live this year or? But I was also fortunate to remember a motto that I've had for a long time. It's a personal motto that goes, Frank, do what you fear. In this, there's power. Fear is not to be afraid of. This motto is the underlying sentiment that has driven my interests and passion to study multicultural counseling, LGBT affirmative counseling, sexual identity development, and Latinx health disparities over the past 26 years. I'm so grateful for the teachers and mentors and friends and advisees who have asked me to leave my comfort zone and question my many privileges so that I could do my best work in these areas. This model also drives me to learn advanced statistical methods and scientific methods, despite the fear and anxiety that usually comes with that. So speaking of which, the title of my talk, some of you might recognize as an M+ statistical code for a latent construct of what defines fellow. Oops, let's go back. Oops. Uh-oh. There? Oops. No. There we go. Yep. Cool. All right. So here's a little brief history of how I got here. And as you can see, I'm getting better looking over the years. So I was really fortunate to be introduced to counseling psychology with a master's degree at Boston College. Really changed my life. And that continued when I obtained a PhD at the University of Missouri, where I was mentored by probably the largest and most fantastic assembly of faculty in counseling psychology. I thank them all, particularly my advisor, Dr. Roger Worthington, for providing me an ideal balance of challenge and care to foster my personal and professional growth. After graduating, I was all excited to go to Miami, Florida to start a postdoctoral position studying HIV prevention. However, upon arrival, I was quickly introduced to the real world, at least the world in Miami, when I learned that the principal investigator and their studies was shut down by, well, the feds, the FBI, due to ethical violations. And that's a story for another time. But that crisis led to a golden opportunity. I was offered a research professor position at the NIH-funded Center for Family Studies, where I was introduced to studying Latinx health disparities, like adolescent substance use and HIV risk. Although it was challenging to make that change, my training as a scientist practitioner prepared me for that role. I was then recruited by Dr. Mario De La Rosa at Florida International University to join his center, also studying Latinx, HIV, and drug abuse, and was appointed assistant professor in their School of Social Work, where I was tenured, even though I was a counseling psychologist. Again, my identity as a counseling psychologist enabled me to sit with our colleagues in public health and social work and introduce them to our scientific foundations. Next, thanks to repetition compulsion, I accepted a position as an associate professor at the University of Albany in counseling psychology. And I was very fortunate there to continue studies of Latinx health disparities and receive a new grant studying HIV testing determinants among Latinx men. And finally, as you can see, I got better looking when I arrived to Arizona State University, where I've been fortunate enough to continue those studies for the last 5 years and provide lots of service as a senior faculty member in our rapidly evolving department. But to conclude, I just want to get a little bit more personal, if I can touch the computer. One more slide. Yeah, okay, there it is. Okay, we're good there. So on March 28th, 2008, my crying wife called me early in the morning from the maternity ward at Pembroke Pines Memorial Hospital. She was alone, and our pediatrician had just informed her that he believed our firstborn child, Reese, had Down syndrome. This is and was the most devastating event of our lives. However, as I tell new parents of children with Down syndrome, our life has had many highs and lows since March 28th, 2008, but I assure you that over time, life gets better day by day. And that said, I want to ask you all and the field of counseling psychology for a favor. Please consider advocating for people with Down syndrome and perhaps even seeing a client with Down syndrome in your practice. I ask this because you and I know advocacy is needed for this underrepresented population. We as a profession thrive in such areas as vocational and mental health counseling and of course, social justice. So let's help them out. And if you feel fears about advocating for or seeing a client with Down syndrome, I recommend you do it anyway, because as I learned, do what you fear. In this, there is power. Fear is not to be afraid of. Thank you everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dillon. And now we have Dr. Boucher. Yes. Yeah.
Hi. Each semester, as I expound on seminal theories of work and career development, I harbor a dirty little secret. I'm standing here today because I thought I needed a drink. I went to a Division 17 social hour in Boston in 1999, and there ran into Pat Raskin, who told me that she was part of a faculty search and I should apply. She promised me that I would never be bored and that I would never miss a soccer game. I wasn't so sure what she meant about the never missing a soccer game, but just the week before, I had noticed the sinking feeling that I was beginning to repeat myself with my clients at the clinic where I worked. So here I am. As I think about my career, I realize I have backed into a number of the things that are most important to me. So I may not be the best illustration of those beautiful path models I teach each semester. Beginning college, I was asked to be a counselor at a summer camp. The kids were all bilingual students from middle school on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And the experience knocked me on my rear end. One thing led to another. I volunteered at their school. I spent the following summer studying Spanish. I later minored in Spanish. I worked one summer at a farm in Puerto Rico. And when I graduated, I taught high school for 3 years in the Dominican Republic in a small town on the border with Haiti, the only English speaker for miles. For the past 30 years, virtually all of my clinical work has been in Spanish. And it isn't about the language. It's about culture, a different way of seeing the world that challenged me, touched me, changed me. I so didn't see it coming. And I know this sounds weird at a time when we talk about colonization and cultural appropriation. And I process that one, try to process that one every day. But I can say I am grateful for the people who have invited me into their world over the years. And I am also very aware that I am a guest in their house. I also backed into psychology. I never took a course in psychology as an undergrad. Later, when I was asked to do some advising at a community service center in New Haven, I remember thinking I had no idea what I was doing and I better get some training. Sam Johnson was teaching a course at what was then called cross-cultural counseling at Teachers College. I applied, I got in, I loved it. The whole therapy thing was new to me. However, many of my cohort volunteered leading groups at GMHC at the height of the AIDS epidemic. The epidemic was horrific, but the clients and clinicians I came to know inspired and amazed me. And after that, I was all in. Statistics also came as a surprise to me. Who knew? Somebody who majored in psychology would have known. One day I tried to explain all my big ideas about culture and family to Roger Myers, and he drew a breath and referred me to the new guy in the faculty, Robert Carter. I wandered down the hall to Robert's office, and he greeted me with what can only be described as the absence of enthusiasm. Wondering what had just happened to him. Robert's team became my home at TC. And I especially remember our sitting quietly for hours, Robert at his desk, me at the team table, writing away. He taught me about race and racial identity, but he also taught me about persistence in research. After one manuscript we had collaborated on came back, I remember saying to him, well, I guess we really bombed at JVB. Robert replied, actually, from Howard Tinsley, that's high praise. Revise it, resubmit it. Really? The feedback was pointed, detailed, no punches pulled. I remember thinking, this is a very odd system. I backed into academia. Well, that's the story about the drink. And for the past 20 and some odd years, I've been primarily teaching and writing. I still supervise psychology interns and see some patients at a community clinic on the side, facilitating groups that I hope are both liberatory and spaces of cultural resistance. However, teaching and writing and mentoring as my primary occupation is a better fit for me. My two favorite moments of the week are meeting with my research team at TC and meeting with a Latina therapy group in Washington Heights. I have learned a lot from both groups. I carry both around in my head. They sort of talk to each other up there. And when I heard that when I went up for promotion, one of the recommenders had described me as a switch hitter, I was very touched by that because I think that person got it exactly right. I am one of those people who needs to be involved in both the scientist and practitioner sides of our field. I need variety. I also backed into my communities of support, beginning with family. GMHC used the co-leader model, and so I turned to another student in the counseling program who I knew had mad group skills. She immediately said yes, and in spite of my entreaties to talk about it, process it some more, she declined to process it more. She was in. So began a fabulous collaboration among as group co-leaders and supportive colleagues in the midst of a horrible plague. 8 years later, when I asked her if she wanted to get married, she again said yes, without seeming to think about it a lot. Sarah, together with our children, Javier and Mateo, are the ground on which I stand. They support me, they put up with me, they make fun of me, too many dad jokes. Most of all, they inspire me. Finally, I backed into this community. SCP has been my academic family, your shared interest in science and practice, in culture and justice, your guidance from the most basic, informing me, for instance, many years ago, that Division 17 business meetings were actually something I should attend. Who knew? I mean, I knew about the social hours, but this is different. Above all, you gave me a community in which to be a psychologist. Nobody does this work alone, not research, not practice. I am so grateful to both of my families. You've helped me see myself as being a good enough scholar and a good enough practitioner. And you, together with my students, my patients, my family, you've taught me to trust joy, even when it shows up in ways I never saw coming. So I guess Pat Raskin was right. For the past 22 years, I certainly have never been bored, never got to the soccer thing, but I have spent a lot of time eating pastelitos and coaching on the Little League fields of Upper Manhattan, where coaches and parents and players may be bilingual, but arguing with the umpires, that is done only in Spanish. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome Dr. McCubbin to the stage.
This is the clicker, but if there's no battery.
Can you see it?
Just click that.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'd like to introduce my new personal assistant. Her name is Melina McCubbin-Sievers, and she's scheduling all my meetings apparently today. On my talk today, or my brief 5 minutes, I'll be talking about kapu aloha, or sacred love. And my research has really centered on navigating and negotiating spaces for resilience, particularly for Indigenous communities and people of color. So I was taught early on about kapu aloha. Kapu in Hawaiian means taboo, but kapu also can mean sacred and sacred aloha, and this radical and sacred love that we must have. That it's really a discipline we need to cultivate. I was raised as by faith as a Christian and by way of life Zen Buddhist. And so the discipline of compassion was very much ingrained in me early on. And it's this idea of aloha and compassion that helps us to intentionalize how we think, how we speak, and how we behave. And we need to think about how we do this without harming others. It helps us to focus on the ultimate purpose and meaning. My very first exposure to therapy was my Japanese grandmother. And she said to me, there are very few people who know how to listen, but many people know how to talk. And I thought that was very wise words. And my first introduction to her family therapy is she would sit between my mom and my dad when they would have disagreements and have a big tub of caramel popcorn and sit there and eat. And then every once in a while, voices would raise, she'd go, and that's how I learned to do therapy. So I want to talk about the 3 picos. This is the image of a pico in Hawaiian culture as well as in Maori culture. It means the beginning and the end. It is also the connection that we have to each other, and as well as the 3 centers. So our first is our piko po'o, which is the top of the head. This is represents our ancestors. It also represents our past and our higher power. Our piko wa'ine, nice clean. Wa'ine is about the navel, and it's about the umbilical cord and our connection to our mother and our connection to people. And this is our source of life, nutrition, and this represents our present. And then we have the piko ma'i, which we're keeping this PG-13. It means the reproductive organs, but really it's about our children, our descendants, our students,
for the next generation and the future of our field. So this is just a brief pico-po'o. This is my ancestors. I was always taught my degree did not belong to me, but my degree belonged to my ancestors because of the sacrifices that they made for me to be here today. The other piece is I learned my Hawaiian heritage through the oli. Oli is a chant. But what many people may not know is that no man has survived of Native Hawaiian ancestry, and my family passed the age of 45 until my father. There's a picture of a black and white photo of a man. That is my grandfather. That is the only picture and the only thing we have that survived. He helped rebuild Pearl Harbor. He was married to a Japanese woman and she had to flee to another island, and he helped rebuild Pearl Harbor at that time. The other black and white pictures represents the fall of the Hawaiian kingdom and the Hawaiian nation and the rise of Hawaii statehood. And what's interesting is in that photograph is my dad, who was 17 years old. So this is recent, very recent in my own epistemology, my own genealogy. And then the Aina. What people don't know is that my father was named after a great uncle, and nobody talked about him. And it was because he died on the island of Molokai in the leper colony. So he was thrown off a boat after diagnosed, and he had to swim and then crawl up the cliffs to get to this place and help establish a settlement. We did not know until my grandmother's death that my grandfather and my grandmother would go there every month by boat. My grandfather would do the landscaping, and my grandmother was a nurse, and she would do annual checkups for them, or monthly checkups. So this is Piko Wai'ena, can't speak. And this is present, and this is my family. And this is a proud picture of my parents on their wedding day. They got married pre-loving. There was a lot of tension and turmoil around their marriage. And because of that, it affected us as we were raised because we were considered mixed race and not worthy. So at times when we talked about racism in graduate school, it was very hard for me because racism was at my dinner table. It wasn't an outside in, it was within the family. So for example, we were not acknowledged by part of the Japanese side of our family. And at Christmas, we did not receive gifts because we were mixed race. So what's nice about this is also though, I got to choose my identity. I got to navigate spaces and I got to have freedom to express who I wanted to be within my family. And this is the last, is the Piko Ma'i. And this is to the children, to the descendants, to the next generations and the future. And so this, I love working with my students. I'm so excited about the future of our profession and them challenging my own notions and decentering my own narrative to heal and to hear what they have to offer. And I also am very proud. This is a picture of Melina with my husband, who's been incredible support at her very first protest. What I didn't know is she would be protesting a lot. And then I just want to end with aloha. And that aloha means that kapu aloha, that sacred love, is not just for each other. It's not just to our ancestors. It's not just to our future, but it is also to our land, to our waterways, to our ocean. So I really hope that we all take the time to love, to show compassion, and to be in harmony with our gods, with our land, and with each other. Mahalo.
Thank you, Dr. McKevin. I'd like to welcome Dr. Mitchell.
Good afternoon. I'd like to start by thanking Louise Dowse, Jeannie Manissi, and Amy Reynolds for endorsing me for this honor. I'm truly touched that they would take the time to do so, but more importantly, I am grateful for their wisdom, their support, their friendship, and their role modeling for most of my career, starting in graduate school. As I think of my life and career journey, there are a few central things: mentoring in its many forms and persistence. As I accept this honor, I want to thank the people in my life who have mentored me or inspired my persistence. I will start with my parents. Growing up in a working class family, I learned the importance of hard work, persistence in the face of obstacles, and striving for a better life. My parents were like many African Americans who migrated from the Deep South in the 1960s to the Midwest in search of a better life financially, and also hoping to escape crippling racism. It is also from them that I learned the importance of community. They instilled in me that concept of each one must reach one. Our family survival often depended on it, and when possible, we return the favor. Outside of my parents, teachers were my first mentors. From them, I received a lot of encouragement and validation. I was that kid, the one that went early and, cleared the blackboards and put all everybody's books out, and, so they just loved me. But school was a place where people seemed to interested in me and believed in me, and that was incredibly important. However, in 10th grade, I won a scholarship to attend a private girls' school in a local suburb. I grew up in Cleveland, and there I had experiences that really drew a sharp contrast between those with resources and those without them. At Laurel School, I learned about the disparities in public and private education and realized that while I was a student in the Cleveland Public Schools for most of my life and was, an A student, I was woefully unprepared for things that other people just took for granted. So I think about the differences in scores on standardized tests like the SAT. And I was like, well, if I were still in a Cleveland public school, we wouldn't have tutoring sessions for 2 months learning Greek and Latin roots so that we would be better able to guess, answers to the SAT. So those kind of things that when people think that their achievements are just because they're smart versus because of the resources that are poured into them. During my undergraduate years at Carleton College, right here in Minnesota, for the first time in my life, I experienced being in a predominantly white environment 24 hours a day. This refers to my fellow students, and it also refers to the snow. I grew up in Cleveland, but Minnesota is a whole nother animal. So similar to my experience in high school, my fellow students of color, not my professors, became my support system and mentors. And also, unfortunately, I was the recipient of some very unfortunate haircuts because when you live in rural Minnesota and you're a Black girl, there's nowhere to get your hair done, but I survived. It was also at Carleton that I worked in 2 student affairs offices that would shape my future professional interests. I worked in the Career Center, and I also worked in what was at the time called the Office of Third World Affairs. Later, that was renamed to the Office of Intercultural Life. This pattern of peer mentorship repeated itself in graduate school at Ohio State, or should I say the Ohio State University. While I'm eternally grateful for my peer mentors, peer mentorship is helpful but not sufficient. A mentor is willing to share their skills, knowledge, expertise, and experience working within systems. A mentor looks out for the professional development and growth opportunities of another colleague. When possible, a mentor eliminates or coaches on how to navigate barriers to professional success. A mentor models the professional behavior that a less seasoned person wishes to acquire. For these reasons, a peer cannot fully and truly serve in this role. Over time, I realized that I was not mentored in the more traditional sense of that one-on-one long-term relationship because I was not similar enough to the mentors available. No one was ever mean to me, no one was ever cruel to me. It was just a case of benign neglect. I was not seen. In graduate school, people who wanted to go into academia or who had similar research interests tend to be mentored. As a counseling center professional, I suspect that I was not mentored because of my feminist values, my social justice values, and my lived experience as a Black woman were often viewed as other and threatening to male patriarchy. Nevertheless, I persisted. And I just started claiming mentors. I'm like, Louise Dowse, you're my mentor. Vivian Boyd, you're my mentor. Because just through observational learning, I would see things that they were doing and I could see myself in that. And so, but I was the type of person who was willing to just put myself out there. Not everybody's willing to do that. And I think the other thing that what I really hope that our profession leans into is the idea that being a mentor should not be about helping it shouldn't be about finding your clone. It should be about helping somebody else in their own becoming. You don't have to hold the same identities of your mentee to be of assistance to them. At the same time, representation does matter. It is powerful, and it should always be a goal in our field. And I will end with this. Last week, our most recent cohort of doctoral psychology interns ended their training year. When I arrived at my office this week, one of them, an African-American cisgender single mom and also immigrant, had left a couple of small gifts for me on my desk. She gave me a book and inscribed the following: Sharon, you allowed and encouraged me to bloom into my authentic self in a clinical setting. That had never happened before. This is what being a counseling psychologist means to me, and this is why I do this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. I'd like to welcome Dr. Kaufman.
She just has to.
Is it up there? Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Dr. Jill Paquin. It's an incredible honor to be here today among such impressive peers. I'd first like to thank Dr. Ruth Bassinger, Dennis Kibligan, Joe Miles, Julie Arsenault, Pat Krasenka, Nikki Coleman, Lisa Drogos, Chris Courtois, Sherry Marmarash, Rebecca McNair-Siemens, Molin Lesh, David Marcus, Karen Tao, Stephanie Budge, Deanna Hamilton, Mary Beth Manarino, and Eileen Alexander. I'd also like to thank the wonderful faculty at the University of Minnesota and the University of Maryland, my friends and colleagues at the American Group Psychotherapy Association and in APA's Division 49, my colleagues and students at Chatham University in Pittsburgh, where I teach in the graduate psychology programs, my parents, Nancy and Jerry Paquin, who are here today, along with my son, Noah Paquin Callahan, and partner Colin Callahan, who are also here today, my brother Andrew, who is not here today because registering family members is actually really expensive. I'd also like to thank my in-laws, Don and Joanne Callahan, for helping us to raise our son while I was busy doing some of this other work. And a special shout out to Minneapolis Public Schools. Given the unique format of the day, rather than talk in depth about my research program or the arc of my career, I wanted to instead focus on how someone, particularly a woman interested in research, puts together a career that is focused on research-oriented at a non-research one university, which isn't necessarily something you hear about a lot at these things, but probably better describes the circumstances of many of the folks here today, maybe in the room, and at the conference who are interested in and passionate about research. Thank you. So these are just a few strategies that I'd like to share with you all. Firstly, find ways to join and bring value to teams. For me, this has meant learning
advanced modeling techniques, deepening my knowledge of qualitative methods, and bringing my somewhat far-reaching social justice background to bear on studying women in STEM, studying the career experiences of diverse psychotherapists, and group therapy. The more roles you can fill, the more opportunities there will be to collaborate. Develop meaningful professional relationships with people you admire and like. Developing close relationships in and outside of my institution has been a joy, and it's led to some of my favorite projects. And conferences are great places for these kinds of budding relationships to form. And then finding out that there's mutual admiration is pretty cool. This is basically the story of a lot of my projects, a lot of my papers. In particular, a paper that I co-authored on social justice ethics in conducting psychotherapy research that I got to co-author with powerhouses Karen Tao and Stephanie Budge. It's how that paper came about. It's also the story of a friendship among academics who are also moms. And not for nothing, those relationships also help to expand your total network's capacity to do other cool stuff. Think creatively and flexibly about what a research project can look like, who it can involve, what kinds of questions you can ask, be it big, be it small. Don't be afraid to be creative. Get involved in editorial leadership. Being the editor-in-chief and the first woman editor of the International Journal of Group Psychotherapy has been a career highlight for me. It's a journal that's been around 80 plus years, and I was the first woman editor. It's allowed me to synergistically work on research, teaching, clinical, and advocacy interests. Aim high for student projects. As one of my colleagues at Chatham says, they can't all be Rolls Royces of dissertations, but there's no reason that some of them under your expert guidance can't be meaningful projects that contribute to the literature. I was thrilled that my recent paper in the American Psychologist about expert group therapist training experiences began as a student's dissertation. Teach research design if your university or program offers a course in this. This has helped me keep on top of methodological approaches and hot controversies in research design. There are actually hot controversies in research design. Expect a lot from your unpaid and unseen labor. Until systems of power are changed, this is going to continue to disproportionately impact women and other marginalized groups in the workplace, particularly in academic settings. So if this applies to you, stop volunteering for everything and start perfecting the art of the enthusiastic, non-committal response. So that when you do commit to chairing that search or planning that party, you've committed to it because it furthers your own goals in at least 2 or 3 ways that are important to you. Lastly, find a supportive partner who believes in your work and believes that your work matters just as much as theirs does. This is especially important, I think, if you identify as a woman. It's important for everyone, but maybe especially important for women. In particular, if you're interested in having kids, raising a family. Colin, I love you. Thanks for everything. This is a true honor. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Bakeman. And now Dr. Kazanka for his second Fellows Talk of the Day. I welcome you.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. It needs to go full. Can you guys see? Is it full screen? No, I think it's this one. Great. Thank you. Yeah, I've got this one. Thank you all for staying. I'm the last one, so we're almost done. On the first day of graduate school at the University of Maryland, I was a very nervous 20-year-old who had come out just a month prior and was anxious to be walking into a graduate seminar in social psychology having only ever taken intro psych 3 years prior. Now, how did I manage this? I'm not really sure. I had chosen to attend Maryland's top-ranked American Studies program because it was one of the few in the country with a flexible enough of a curriculum to allow students to take courses in the social sciences, whereas most other programs focused exclusively on the humanities. The truth is, I had no idea what I was doing. And the summer before classes started, I asked Chuck Stangler, I didn't know who he was, he's a renowned stereotype researcher, if I could take his group processes class. And I pretended to know what I was talking about. And for some reason, he said yes. On that first day of class, there were a ton of people in the room because someone who taught the general social psych seminar was on sabbatical, and all of the counseling psych students were taking group processes with the rest of us to fulfill their social psych requirement. The professor was late to the first class, which is a really funny story in and of itself, and he left us with a question to discuss, and I think it was something existential like, is there such a thing as human nature? Now, I sat quietly for the first and probably last time in my graduate career, and I watched the counseling and social students duke it out. Now, at one point, this really smart and captivating woman said something to the effect of, I think all this sounds really racist and heteronormative. And I thought, who is that? It turns out that was Julie Arsenault, a third-year counseling psych student at the time, who became my best friend. And she introduced me to the amazing Jill Paquin, who you've already heard from today, as well as Joe Miles, who I'll get to in a minute. Now, these people became my BFFs and my co-navigators through graduate school, and we became what we call ourselves a queer family. I formed a special relationship with Joe, who became my boyfriend, and then my partner, and then my husband. And Joe is many, many things, including an exceptionally talented psychologist. Early on in our relationship, we started collaborating on projects and eventually became co-authors in scholarship, as well as co-pilots in life. In 2017, after 13 years of partnership, including 5 years living and working on opposite sides of the country, we got married, having finally obtained tenure-track jobs in psychology in the same place together, wonderful and ridiculous Knoxville, Tennessee. None of what I've been able to accomplish within psychology would have been even remotely possible without Joe, who has worked tirelessly with me to create a life in this field and who has supported me in more ways than I can enumerate in 2 hours, much less 5 minutes. 4 of my mentors deserve special mention because they created the foundation for my interdisciplinary career and set me on the path to become, I believe to my knowledge, the only person in the country who has a PhD in American Studies and is a tenured full professor of psychology. Dennis Kibligan believed in me and brought me onto his editorial team at the beginning of his tenure at JCP, which has been by far the most rewarding intellectual exercise of my career and made an editor out of me. Helen Neville shared wisdom, guidance, and encouragement beginning in the very early days of my post-PhD career when I was so lost, and she made me feel like I could actually make it in this field, specifically doing the kinds of critical work I would hope to do, and that are really only possible because Helen created the space for it. Now, I can't even fathom the impact that Lisa Spanierman has had on my life since she surprised me at APA in 2009 at my poster session in which I was critiquing some of her work. She took to me, or maybe took pity on me, eventually took me to lunch, and we became fast friends, and eventually many years later, collaborators. So many others who were critical to my success in finding my place in this field, including Terry Tracy, who mentored me through the publication of my first psychology research article at JCP. Dorothy Espelage, who likewise supported me in my unusual work as a brilliant editor for my first latent profile analysis paper in 2016. My peer colleagues, Katie Zayers, Melanie Brewster, and Trish Rocky Bogdan, Ryan Duffy, Nikki Coleman, and Chris Davids, Paz Galupo for so many wonderful things, including also being a weird psychologist who mostly hangs out with counseling folks. Brent Mallinckrodt, who started the process of moving me to UT, and of course, the incomparable Bonnie Marotti, who all of you know, She has brought so many things to my life beyond our writing together, but our work together over the past decade has truly meant the world to me, and it's made me a smarter, more thoughtful, and more purposeful person. And I don't have time to name all of them today, but there's about 40 feminist social psychologists, including Liz Cole, Sarah McClelland, Isis Settles, and Lisa Bolek, without whom I never would have survived. And even though they're not counseling psychologists, they taught me how to think and act like a psychologist, to pass as one, as I've been told I sometimes do, and to be a kind of psychologist whose skin I could live in and be more true to my critical aspirations. And then there's Ruth. Ruth changed everything about my life for so many reasons. Because she's so smart, so generous, so vivacious, so intolerant of arbitrary rules and boundaries. She practically insisted I develop a career in psychology. Ruth is not a handholder, to be clear, but at every step I've taken since we first met, when I was barely 21, I have always been able to look over my shoulder, and Ruth is right there, challenging me, encouraging me, and cheering me on. It was because of all those people that I was able to move to UT and be with Joe and join the faculty in psychology in 2014. And during my time there, I've been so fortunate to work with amazing colleagues in counseling psych, like Erin Hardin, Kirsten Gonzalez, and my whip smart doctoral students, Carrie Frantel, Elliot Spengler, Elena Shuk, David Tierney, and Erin McConaughey, who have helped me find my way in this field. I'm so proud of the work that I've been able to do, but it's because of counseling psychologists' willingness to examine our field critically, to embrace unusual methods, and to center rather than marginalize questions of justice that are the reason I get up in the morning still so excited about this career and the home that I'm so privileged to build here. My doctoral advisor, Sherry Parks, a brilliant Black feminist cultural critic, once called my dissertation project unusual, and she meant it as a compliment. She told me that she understood I wanted to do a PhD that would open as many doors as possible, including one to psychology. She deserves much of the credit because she believed I'd wind up in the right place, even as I was so unsure where that would be and what it would look like. On the one hand, I wish I could go back and tell that 20-year-old heading into his first class of graduate school that it would be all right, that I'd wind up with a rewarding job in a field that I hadn't yet discovered, and with friends and family that make it all so worthwhile. But on the other hand, all that uncertainty is part of the process and part of what has made it so exciting. Thank you, Counseling Psychology, for having me. It has been the privilege of a lifetime making community with you. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Kazanka. I don't know if any of you are feeling as inspired and just so excited about our profession, but I just want to thank all of these fellows for sharing their journeys, what they're focused on. I am just in awe of the multiplicity of ways of impact that counseling psychologists are having. And I can encourage you to think about fellowship and to encourage colleagues that you might think would be good candidates for fellowship. And I'm just so inspired, and how we do all the things with practice and research and activism and advocacy and teaching, and it's just phenomenal. We had a couple of people who couldn't be here today due to the world. You know, what we're hoping is to be able to get some recorded talks from Dr. Consoli, Dr. Baden, and the others that are on the sheet that could not make it. So we'll hope to share those. And I wanted to really thank the past chair, Elizabeth Holloway, for all of her work with this group. and preparing the fellows for during the pandemic and delayed votes and all the ways that she has contributed to our process and our fellows committee and our incoming chair, Dr. Vargas, as well. So please think about fellows. Please congratulate these wonderful additions to our SCP fellowship, and don't go away because we're going to get pictures. Thanks everyone for coming.